Bizarre Reality Media.
Indiana County 911. My brother's gone. Can you be a little more specific, sir? He took my brother. Who took him? I don't know who took him. I don't know what. Sir, take a breath. Explain to me what happened.
And I looked out and there was this big red blinking UFO.
I can just say this. Something's going on in the woods. Something's going on. They're not dogs. They're not coyotes. What could it be, right?
I had an encounter with a skunk ape, and it completely altered the course of my life.
I found a skull. Are you guys going to want to come film this?
Put him out. 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 Put him out.
I just see it.
Sighting of a UFO hovering over a barn.
Millie woke up from a dream, and when I went into the bedroom, she said, "There's a monster on the wall."
They saw that the creature had run through a barbed wire fence. They were able to obtain hairs. They sent the hairs to their lab, and it came back as an unknown creature.
Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin.
What is up, Bizarrites, and welcome back to the most bizarre show on the internet. I am the one that a handful of people refer to as Shane Squatch.
What is that fucking thing?
And alongside me, I have the infamous Big Bad Boo Daddy himself, Sir Orin Felix. Trying to PG up the show a little bit. Maybe we'll, not be taken a little bit more seriously if we don't get too far taken away with using sound clips. So we're gonna mature up our sound clips a little bit around here.
We're probably never going to be taken seriously, but yeah. So
we can try. We can try at least.
We've traded the sexy, suggestive opening for a more spooky one, so I'm all for it.
It's still moaning, just a different type of moaning.
Hey, that is true. You've got us there. It's hard to argue with that. So just a quick piece of news and updates. So next week, I am not going to be available to record on our normal recording date. My baby sister is getting married. So that takes precedence over Bizarre Encounters. I'm sorry, Shane, but it does.
Family always comes first. That's, some podcasters don't have that mentality, but me being a dad man, family always comes first.
That's right. So we're going to do something a little different and special for you guys next week. So be on the lookout for that.
If you guys might be interested in checking out the Halloween special, that'll be happening on October 30th at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over there across all of the different places that you can find Bizarre Reality Media. And if anybody might be interested in being part of that special still, you guys can call in, leave your own bizarre experiences for us to share on the show. And as I always say, if you guys need to be anonymous, I can definitely do that for you. But specifically, you guys will have to be Robot Alex Jones. But if you guys might be interested in doing that, that number is 313-364-1551. You guys can text or call that 24/7. And again, if you happen to miss that, it is available down in the show description.
Scary robot voices only.
Maybe a ghost. Maybe I'll do a ghost voice. Ghost voice might be fun.
And our next episode of Bizarre Inquiries, our YouTube live show, is going to be Thursday, November 6th, roughly 7:15 Eastern Time on the Bizarre Reality Media. See, I did it.
There you go. You got it that time. There you go.
Bizarre Reality Media YouTube channel. So you guys be sure to submit questions or clips or articles or anything you want us to inquire about, and also join us in the chat during the episode. And if anyone is interested in being a guest on the show or getting up with us for any reason whatsoever, Shane, tell them how they can do that.
You guys can first and foremost email us at bizarreencounters@outlook.com, or that number that I mentioned a little bit earlier. You guys can, again, always text or call that 24/7. And again, if you missed that number is 313-364-1551.
And if you guys would like to support the show, Shane, now tell them how they can do that.
You guys can definitely go and check out the Bizarre Reality Media Patreon. 2 tiers available over there, ad-free/early access and full access. And if you guys want to see what it's all about, but you guys don't want to spend any money on it yet, there are 7-day free trials. You guys can see what it's all about for a week and see if you guys want to stick along and tag along. And if you guys do, we definitely appreciate the support.
And you guys can also check out the Bizarre Reality Media merch store with t-shirts starting at the oddly specific and terrifyingly low price of just $15.68 plus shipping.
Wow, that's fantastic. Who said that? And if you guys...
wasn't you.
It definitely wasn't me. And I know times can be tough out there, but if you guys would like to support the show in some other ways, what are some awesome ways that they can do that, Orin?
You can leave a review and like, share, and subscribe and do all the internet things.
You guys can always go and follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
You can share the show with your friends and family or people you don't like. That would probably be more likely.
If you think the show will really annoy them, send it to them. We love the bad comments because we'll talk shit on the show.
1 stars only.
1 stars only. 1 or 5 stars only. And you guys can also catch live shows on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube, Twitch, and Rumble channels. You'll catch this show, Inquiries of All Reality, and Bizarre Encounters, and we always appreciate you guys showing up.
All that stuff, I don't understand what it is. But anyway, all this shit we've mentioned is in the link tree and the show description.
Please welcome to the show, biologist, cryptozoologist, and some may even know him as the Beast Hunter. Please welcome to the show, Pat Spain. How's it going today, man?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Absolute pleasure to have you on the show, man. Doing pretty good. Always excited to talk to you about cryptids and creatures and all of your research that you do on your end, man. So, as usual, man, I'm always looking forward to these conversations.
Same here. Yeah, I love your questions, and I like how you dive a little bit deeper than a lot of other interviewers, which keeps me on my toes, and I think it gives everybody a little bit more than they get from other spots. So thank you for that.
And we got a third mind thrown in on this conversation, so who knows where we might end up going, because we got 3 analytical minds diving into cryptids who do a lot of our own research into it. So I think we might hopefully uncover something new and interesting here, man.
Excellent. Yeah, good to meet you, Orin.
Yes, it's nice to meet you, Pat. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Like I said a little bit before we started recording, Shane's told me a lot about you, so I'm definitely excited to pick your brain a little bit. With that being said, would you mind kind of sharing a little bit about yourself and some of the research you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to school for marine bio, and I've been doing biology, wildlife biology, basically my whole life. When you're the kind of guy who's in a field who just caught a rattlesnake, you tend to get a crowd gathered around you. And, that's kind of the reputation that I ended up getting growing up. So I ended up giving all these impromptu talks, just about the animals that I was finding and how excited I was to find them, walk around the neighborhood and teach people about, whatever it was that I can get my hands on. Oh, I found a giant yellow spotted salamander. Come on, everybody, check it out. And then I went to school for marine bio, and I taught a bunch of classes and labs and loved that and loved trying to reach people who maybe weren't as interested in wildlife as I was. And then my wife actually suggested that the way that I could get a bigger audience for this stuff and to really express my passion for these animals is to do it on TV. So that's what I did. I went out for a show called King of the Jungle 2 on Animal Planet way back in 2003. And I've just been kind of going ever since then. But I have this whole other side where my great uncle was Charles Fort. And I grew up reading his books. Yeah. Without even realizing that he was a relative. I was into his books. And it wasn't until high school that my grandmother, who always used to say, "You're just like your Uncle Charlie," I had no idea what she was talking about until she saw me reading the Book of the Damned, like rereading. And she's like, "That's your Uncle Charlie." I was like, what? So all of it started to click and started to make sense. And I've always been into cryptozoology. I held off calling myself a cryptozoologist for years. I just didn't feel like I had earned it. But after being elected or being granted Cryptozoologist of the Year in 2023, I guess I can officially call myself one. So I'm proud to have that title also.
Not just any cryptozoologist, Cryptozoologist of the Year and Paranormal 40 and royalty. So, I mean, You're a man of many hats, it sounds like.
I keep busy, for sure.
And not only that, but unlike a lot of cryptozoologists, he has like a different spun perspective on it. I know a lot of people like to get into the woo-woo, and I know that Pat definitely gets into the woo-woo, but his perspective as a biologist kind of brings a lot more like real-world validity to a lot of these creatures. And I think that one of the most interesting things about the way that you do your research, Pat, is that you don't go out there saying like, "Oh, I'm going to find this monster." You end up trying to find the folklore, all the roots of everything, how people actually kind of got to the idea of developing this creature. And of course, you're going to call something out if you think it's really out there. But on the flip side of it, you're one of those people that isn't going to let something continue on for years if you don't think that there's anything to it. You're going to say, all right, this is the animal that I think that they were talking about. And the reason I say that is because of all these stories. Like, you just do it a lot differently, even with the expectation that you actually go out there, you talk to the tribes, you actually get their folklore firsthand instead of collecting it from other people. Just a really interesting way to do research, man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I love the I love the stories. I love the myths behind it. That's really what I think cryptozoology is. Cryptozoology is just biology with folklore. So there really isn't a distinction. I mean, any animal that hasn't been given a scientific name yet is a cryptid. So there's a million potentially that's not even an exaggeration. There's a million cryptid insects out there. But we don't really hear that term being used for them. But until an animal's been given a scientific name, it is a cryptid in my mind. So when I hear these stories, when I hear these myths and these legends from people who live in the area where these animals are found, I want to hear more about it. And just like Shayn was saying, I want to go there and I want to hear the stories directly from them, because a lot is lost in translation and a lot is lost on the camera. If you just watch a show, it's not the same as being there. You know, I'm talking one-on-one to an individual and the camera's showing like a 2-shot of me talking to that person, but what you don't see is their entire family behind them, who's either feeding them lines or kind of nudging each other and laughing, where I'm like, oh, this is probably not legit what they're saying right now. Or absolutely horrified and reminding them of, a little factoid that maybe they had missed or they forgot to tell in the retelling of this because their family's been hearing this story for so many years. Or, with the ring pendek, when this one gentleman was kind of describing his encounter with it, he was glossing over some of the details. And then one of the researchers that I was with actually asked about its genitalia. And his wife just blushed and turned, and she started hitting him and yelling at him. And he, immediately lit up, and he's like, no one's asked me that before. And he went into a really in-depth details about the animal's genitals. And that just made it so much more real. I mean, it's funny because of what it is, but also having that interaction and seeing that firsthand was like, oh, this guy is not making this up. This is not, some kind of story like this. He's clearly talked to his wife about this before. But yeah, so being there and hearing from people who've actually witnessed the creatures, or who know the folklore because they grew up with it, or who just know the areas where the animals are spotted, gives you such a depth of knowledge that you really can't get anywhere else.
Well, I think an interesting point that you brought up is the fact that, like you said, a cryptid is really just an undiscovered, undocumented animal. Yeah. And, we're guilty of it as well on this show. But a lot of times it seems like, the Hopkinsville goblins and, the Flatwoods monster and things like that get lumped in with cryptids who, if these stories are true, they're clearly not cryptids and some undiscovered animal. So, it's just the idea we've been talking about a lot lately is all these stories probably have this nugget of truth somewhere, and you just have to figure out the nugget of truth. And especially with these older tales and like Native American type legends, you have to kind of ask yourself, what could these accounts mean in modern day real world terms? And it sounds like that's kind of the work that you're doing, is going boots on the ground, talking to these people who have had these real world encounters and figuring out that nugget of truth in these kind of fantastical stories.
Exactly. And that's one of my favorite examples of that is the Mongolian death worm. So
we've covered that on the show too.
Yeah, it's wild, right? I mean, you hear these stories and you're like, what? No, there's no way. This monster, like this thing can't shoot electricity and blow itself up and spit hot acid and, all of a sudden pop up out of these sands. And what's a worm doing in the sands anyway? But when you get to Mongolia, and when you really start investigating the biology, you're like, oh, shooting blood. Well, there's a horned lizard that shoots blood out of its eyes. Oh, okay. Well, there's an electric eel that, can electrocute. And when something's burrowing through the sand, it could be building up a static charge. And then you're like, well, is it really sand there? So I was digging in the Gobi Desert, and in parts of it, it's soil. It's not actual sand, it's soil. And you're like, oh, I probably could find some kind of worm here. And then you start really talking to the individuals who are there, and the more conversations that I had with the nomads who were there, the more that I was realizing that they have such an immense respect for nature. Just absolutely, it's a Buddhist country, and they have respect for all life, but their sort of reverence for the wild is like no other culture that I've really experienced. And it's a really, really harsh environment. And one of the rules of being in a harsh environment is you don't want to get hurt, right? You don't want to get hurt because any injury can turn deadly pretty quickly when you're in a really harsh environment. So they, essentially all of the legends that I learned could boil down to, don't mess with nature if you don't have to. That's really so they're not digging looking for lizards. They're not catching snakes because they have no reason to catch a snake. So they know the animals that they interact with every day very, very well. But anything that's trying to stay hidden, they're going to let it stay hidden. And all the stories of the death worm, all the horror stories that you hear, I really started going through, and I have like a log somewhere of all the interactions that I could find. Every single one of them was someone messing with it. It was like, oh, this person poked it. Oh, this person stepped on it. Oh, this person, threw gasoline on it. Oh, this person tried. And every one of them is someone messed with it. It's never the Mongolian deathworm came up and ate this person who was asleep, or who, spit acid on someone who was just walking the other direction. So it really comes down to, okay, there's stories about this, and the legends about this are all just allegories for just don't mess with something that you don't have to. Like, just live in harmony in your environment, live and let live. And if you see something that might look like a death worm, just don't poke it.
We apologize, guys, for the interference, but we will be right back. And now back to the show. So I know in Mongolia they do put a lot of stock behind the existence of the Mongolian deathworm. What was some of your conclusions with it? Do you put stock or validity into it, or do you think it's a misidentified animal 100%?
So I do think that there are unknown creatures in Mongolia, and I think that anything burrowing is the most likely to be some kind of unknown creature. I don't think that there is one animal that has all of the traits that they're describing. I think it's probably an amalgamation or kind of a combination of a few different animals. I think it's very, very possible that there's a type of spitting cobra that is there, that we know that there are ones bordering in the areas that border the Gobi Desert. So it wouldn't be too hard to say that one made its way there. There are sandfish, like the lizards, that really go through the sand very, very easily and kind of disappear quickly. If you just saw the tail of one of those going away, there's also grubs. So a really large grub. I dug up a mole cricket, and have you ever seen a mole cricket? They're about that big. They have these really cool kind of front paws that they separate the sand with, and they also send this vibration. They send out a vibration. That's their call, like their mating call. So they'll dig a tunnel, and the tunnel gives them acoustics to send out this mating call. So we heard one. We could feel it on the sand, and then I dug it up, and the nomads that I was with freaked out. Their mind was blown. They had no idea what this was. These huge hulking wrestler guys were like, what are you doing? You messed with something. Why would you mess with it? And they shake. So I picked it up, and you could feel it kind of give a little vibration. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't convince them that was an electric shock. So really what that's saying to me is that there's these activities of known creatures that happen that in their mind, you don't mess with anything that you don't have to. And it's just conflating these stories and making it into something like the Mongolian deathworm. There are unknown animals there, but I don't think that there's an actual Mongolian deathworm in the way that we think of it. Right? And that's another problem with cryptozoology, is that I love cryptozoology, and I would love to find an animal that kind of meets the descriptions of this. But for the general public, for cryptozoology, take the Mongolian deathworm or sea serpents. If I found a new species of squid that could explain a lot of the sightings of a sea serpent, most of the public would go, yeah, but it's not a sea serpent. And if we find a relic polar bear in Nepal that meets with a lot of the sightings of the Yeti, People will go, yeah, that's cool, but it's not the Yeti. And you're like, but it is. Like, what if it is? So if we found a new species of spitting cobra in Mongolia, which is entirely possible, I would be super excited and be like, yep, death worm. But the general public would go, no, it's still not the death worm. We're still looking for it.
That's another thing we talk about a lot on the show is this idea of the issue of language and people trying to describe indescribable things with the best language they have. And like you said, throughout the years, these tales could get confabulated into something more fantastical than maybe they initially were when they started off more as cautionary tales. And as you were telling that story, it reminded me of, we covered, it's probably been a year or so ago on the show, the Mukele Bembe.
I was just about to bring that up too.
And it's, very similar story from my understanding. And I'm sure you're far more of an expert than me and Shayn combined. But, these people went on all these expeditions to try to find this thing. And eventually, they showed the locals and the natives pictures of, I believe it was like a rhinoceros or something. They're like, yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, that's all I could think of while you were telling this story about the Mongolian death worm is how similar to that account it really is. And like we said, like how through the years in the game of telephone, these normal things can be just really blown out of proportion.
Oh, 100%. So I went to West Africa. I was in the Congo, Cameroon, and the Central African Republic, and lived with 3 different tribes there, and two pygmy tribes, the Baka and the Bayaka tribes, and they were incredible and very welcoming, and it was a really unique experience. And I did that. So I had pictures on an iPad. And showing them the different photos, because you always read the stories about, like, oh, you show someone a sauropod and they're like, oh, that's Mukele Bembe. And I definitely found that a lot of it was in the way that you ask the question. And a lot of it was in the order that you show the pictures. And a lot of it was if you're what I found in the Baka and the Bayaka is that you were never talking one-on-one, ever. It was a group, always. They wanted to be there. This is the most action that the village has seen. I was the first Westerner that any of the kids had seen, which was super fun. So I got to put like millipedes on my face and like run around the village. And they were like, he's crazy. So, just all kinds of fun stuff with that. But so this is like the most exciting thing that's happening this week for this group. So you're with a group of people, and I would... because one of our producers spoke French, and he could hear like the side conversations that were going on. And we showed a picture of a crocodile, and the person's like, oh, that's a monitor lizard. And someone else is like, no, it's not a monitor lizard. Like monitor lizard, they're the ones that we find over blah, blah, blah. This is a caiman. They're like, no, I don't think that's a caiman either. So there was a lot of that back and forth with literally every photo. And then we'd show, like a jaguar. And they've never seen or heard of a jaguar, but they're like, oh, it kind of looks like maybe a leopard. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I can understand that. That makes sense. And then whatever the first big animal that they didn't recognize that was Mukele Bembe. And then there'd be like a conversation about it. Like, I don't think that's it. I'm pretty sure like that one looks like the neck isn't long enough, or that doesn't have spikes. And, so yeah, there was a lot of tales being told over many, many years. But my favorite thing about Mukele Bembe is whether or not you believe that there is a dinosaur in West Africa, which I do not, other than all the birds. All birds are dinosaurs. But other than that, I don't think there's a sauropod there. But this legend needs to exist, and it needs to perpetuate, because in the tribes that I was with, there's a huge like machismo kind of culture where you have to be the toughest, you have to be the bravest. People file their teeth down to points to make themselves look more fierce, and they do this facial scarification to make themselves look more fierce. So if you say, I don't want to go down to the river at night because there are crocodiles, people will be like, oh, you're weak, you're disrespecting your family, how can you? But if you say, I don't want to go down to the river at night because Mukele Bembe was spotted, everyone goes, oh, smart. Yeah, good move. Don't do that. So it's like almost a social out. this legend needs to be there in order to not do really dangerous and dumb things.
Well, and Shayn, I'll let you get a word in because I know I've just kind of been going off to the races this episode, but that's so funny. We've been talking a lot lately about how a lot of these stories could have started off as cautionary tales, like the Wendigo is what we've talked about a lot recently. And then Shayn did a great episode just last week on vampire lore, just kind of like for Halloween. And we saw a lot of connections between Wendigo lore and vampire lore and how a lot of that could have started off as cautionary tales as well. And Shayn, now I'll shut up and let you talk.
Oh, I mean, even expanding into some of the paranormal stuff we're talking about. I mean, you hear about all of these different cities that all have these roads that they're haunted roads. You got to drive slow. You got to do this on them. And we're talking about even with those are cautionary tales, because if you tell the kids in the local area on this really, really sharp turn that there might be ghosts, you better not go through that area, or if you do, you better go slow, then you're avoiding people actually going off the side of the road because now they're looking for a ghost. So even some of these cautionary tales, even in like modern like United States society, also play that same role. Because, I mean, it's making people be a little bit more cautious and aware of what's going on around them, which honestly is never a bad thing, even if it is folklore, or if there is truth to it. I mean,
100%. There's this great story from Brazil that I love with the boto. Are you guys familiar with the boto?
I don't think so.
So the boto is a pink river dolphin. And these are real animals, but the legend is that occasionally the boto will leave the river and put on like a fancy suit and go to like dances and impregnate women. And they have no ability to resist the boto. He's just so desirable and just this like siren song kind of thing. And there's actually in remote areas of Amazonia, people who have the boto listed as their father when there's like an unexpected pregnancy. And it's this amazing, like culturally accepted story where, you know, a young woman shows up pregnant, who's unmarried, shows up pregnant, and the parents are like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Like, what are we going to do? And she's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I was at the dance. It was the boto. Like, it must be. I don't remember. And the parents are like, oh, well, great. All right. Well, so we're going to be really happy about this. And like, maybe your boyfriend will like marry you anyway. And see, and like, this is, and the guys are like, yeah, well, I'll raise them as if it's my own. And like, this is a totally culturally accepted thing. And I think that's really beautiful. I love it. It's like, well, we don't really want to deal with this. So we have this story that everyone buys into, and yeah, we're going to go with it.
I mean, you end up hearing those same stories, even to translate into the United States with, I mean, talking about like going to dances with the devil. You hear this down in like Mexico and stuff too. Yeah. So it's almost like you see these same stories reoccurring. It's just like the archetypes stay the same, but like the visual of them changes up a little bit. Because even how many stories have we covered, Orin, where it talks about these things coming from the water and then having relations with people on land and going back in? Like, what was that one we covered recently where the person had like the half the bottom of them was like a crocodile or an alligator from like Brazil or something?
The El Hombre Came On.
Yeah, that one. Nice. Yep, that's another prime example of the same thing.
Well, that's and awesome. Other than that, you know, we've told stories about like Sasquatch type entities here in North Carolina where I live that, you know, they do the same thing, like hide in the edge of the woods and watch young women while they bathe and then, you know, beat them over the head and abduct them and drag them to their cave. So, I mean, it seems, you know, like Shayn said, this is a motif that pops up time and time again in just the little bit of research we've done.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
What was that one that we covered recently where he got the female from giving her the little like gemstones and stuff? It was a North Carolina story too.
The Boojum.
Yeah, the Boojum. That was another prime one.
Sasquatch type wild man creature who was, like we said, spying on women as they bathed and then abducted one of them and, you know, made her his wife and, lured her with shiny rocks and gemstones.
As one does.
Yeah.
As one does.
Isn't that where I think that's the one where the whole hootenanny thing comes from, right? Because the girl's name was Annie or something like that, and she'd go walking through the woods hooting for him or whatever, so they started using the term hootenanny.
Yeah, the folklore is that the young girl who got abducted, her name was Annie, and to communicate with this Bigfoot or wild man, she would, you know, hoot and holler at him in the woods, and they, you know, locally started calling her Hootin' Annie, and then, you know, that's where the term Hootin' Annie for, you know, like a party or whatever in the rural South came from. So, you know, it's funny, you know, I've lived in North Carolina my entire life. I never knew that aspect of the story until I was doing the research for that episode. So it's funny, you know, basically a cryptid story has pervaded culture and society at that point.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. No, I'd never heard that either. That's great.
All right, guys, we got to take another break. We'll be right back. And now we're getting back to the bizarre.
Well, I guess since we're kind of talking about some Sasquatch stuff, we definitely have to dive into some of your ape men research. I know that you've done this in multiple different places, so whatever one you might want to get into, but I always think it's fun to maybe talk about the one that you maybe put the most stock or validity in.
Yes, I think orang pendek is one of the most fascinating to me, and I went into that investigation really thinking that this was mistaken identity for an orangutan. If you've ever seen the giant male orangutans, when they get so large that they don't really go up in the trees very much anymore, they're basically on the ground. They get these crazy long dreads, like in their face plates get enormous, so they just look otherworldly. And I really thought that that's what I expected to find, and that is not what I found when I got there. When I got there, I found that the folks that were seeing orang pendek had really great biological stories to tell, and all of it made sense from the perspective of a wildlife biologist. People were talking about animals that don't necessarily use trails, so they'd be really hard to capture images of. They were talking about primarily nocturnal primates, of which gibbons really are the only one that are, that's a borderline nocturnal primate. The way that they described their anatomy was nothing like an orangutan. The way that they described their behaviors was nothing like an orangutan. And the fur color on them, which they always said hair. They would never say fur. They would always say that it had hair, which was interesting. And they did make that distinction between them and other primates. The way that they described the coloration was not like anything for a gibbon or an orangutan either. Because it's hair, not fur, a lot of the people that we spoke with would always say that it was black hair, because the only hair that they're used to seeing is black. So fur can be all different colors, but then I brought a L'Oreal color chart with like little samples of hair, and I was like, "Can you show me like which one of these is the closest?" And it was across the spectrum. Like they would point to all different things, like never black, but because it was hair, it had to be black. So it was just like this weird kind of lost in translation thing, and and finally it really came down to this one guy who was an eyewitness. And as I'm asking him questions about it, I was somewhat letting it slip that I really thought that he had probably seen a gibbon. This individual, I thought that he had seen a gibbon. And after maybe 5 minutes, he kind of sat back and laughed. And he was like, "Look it, man, I know what a gibbon is." And he's like, "The only people who don't believe in orang pendek are people who don't live here." And I was like, "Oh, all right. Yeah, good point. I am I'm being an ugly American right now. And yes, thank you for putting me in my place. You're right. Like, why should I question this when, you live here and see them all the time?"
Well, that's like a double-edged sword too, because like we were talking about a little bit earlier, sometimes you need that outside visual to actually kind of bring it into the picture. But then in the other situations like this, it's like when people are all describing the same thing and they are aware of the animals in the area, then it's like, what direction do you really go in? I mean, if there's some of these tribes where they don't necessarily like have much communication outside of like their group, then that's one thing. Of course, they might have some misidentification. They might have different words for things, but if they're like honestly familiar with that area, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. You don't know which direction to go in. Is it a matter of a different perspective, or is it really, really something out there? And I mean, it's like the stone apes. I know I always bring this one up every time we talk, Pat, but the stone apes are like a prime example of that. That's one of those things that like exists in folklore. But even like the Vietnam vets that were going at the time were like, yeah, these things are everywhere. They'll just start throwing rocks at you. Like there's so much validity behind those stories. Everybody in Vietnam even believes in them. But then everybody outside is just like, yep, nope, it's just another Sasquatch story. It's just another folklore thing.
Yeah, but that is a great one, and that's one that I really, really want to get over there to explore. My wife is Vietnamese, and she's a second generation. She was born here, but both of her parents came over as refugees. And I've tried to get her father to talk about the rock apes a couple times, and it's really one of those things that like he'll tell me a couple things, but then he always goes, but you should not be looking for them. Like you should not go. So you should definitely go to Vietnam. Do not look for them while you're there. And I want to look for them.
Well, I mean, with the stuff like that, it almost kind of makes you wonder if they might not necessarily be fully what you expect, but maybe some type of like undiscovered tribe. Because even if they go generations, no contact, they're all breeding with each other. I mean, they might starting to get that smaller gene where they all start becoming shorter because that's the only gene that's getting passed around. And I don't know how far this would go with people, but obviously you throw like a hog out in the wild and eventually they'll start growing hair and they'll start growing tusks and start turning into a boar. So I know there's a lot of people that have thrown theories with these like wild men type people, but if you have generation and generation and generation, like who knows where that could possibly end up? Like what we're thinking is the Stone Ape could be literally just like a miniature tribe of like really hairy people that exist in this area, but they have their own language. They don't communicate with the outside world. So they look like a whole different creature, not realizing that again, they might just be like a tribe of small people.
Yeah. So I mean, the wild boar, pigs, like domesticated pigs and humans, two very, very different scenarios where the domesticated boar does kind of revert back to the more wild type as it's being released. But those are traits that are in there. But then you're right that isolated populations can develop either what we would call island dwarfism or island gigantism. And all different species do show that. They believe that's what happened to Homo floresiensis, the hobbits in Indonesia. They think that was island dwarfism that occurred. There were also tiny elephants that were there and giant Komodo dragons. So you get some island dwarfism, island gigantism. And I've read different theories as to why one happens versus the other, most likely due to nutrient availability. But the pygmy tribes in Africa, that definitely does not explain them because it's the same nutrients that are available. There's abundant nutrients. They think that may be more the trait for being small. There was an advantage to being able to get through the bush easier. For you're not getting hit with as many things. There aren't as many things in the way. But when I saw most of the pygmy tribes that I was with, unfortunately, there's a lot of discrimination against them by the local peoples, and a lot of them have tried to sort of marry outside the tribe and have kids outside the tribe to no longer be full pygmies. But there are some who are, and when I saw them, it was striking. It was really, there were some who still lived in the forest, still lived a nomadic lifestyle. And when they would come in, you just kind of see them on the outskirts, the size of children, but people in their 30s. So that is possible. And when you do have an isolated population and you are getting a smaller gene pool, there are certain traits that can be, that do get perpetuated that would make someone look unusual. So yeah, there's every possibility that this is more of a group or a tribe.
Just in that case too, just out of curiosity, when they develop this like dwarfism, is it like dwarfism like how we know it, where you kind of get some of the like not normal body proportions, or is it almost like they have normal body proportions but they're just like a shrunken size?
Just a smaller size, yes. Yeah, it's just they use the same term, the island dwarfism or island gigantism. And there's also a benthic. Deep sea tends to do the same thing. Deep sea, you tend to get either tiny or huge as well. But the tribes that I was with, at least, it was the same proportions, but just much, much smaller. And it really was striking. It was really like at a distance, I thought this was a child. And then you get up close and see like wrinkles and the scarification and the filed teeth. And it was like, whoa.
Well, I mean, that throws more into like the whole Stone Ape concept then, because if they're not, oddly proportioned, then it would make it that much easier for them to be able to get around the jungle super easy and have the ability to throw the rocks as precise as they do. So, I feel like that's probably a pretty good idea on what these things could potentially be, on top of possibly some, undiscovered ape possibly. I mean, I definitely put stock into the fact that there might be some mini variation of Sasquatch, because it seems like those stories that kind of exist all around the world. And I'm not putting stock in that in every single one, but at a certain point, I think that there has to be something like this out there, or there was something like this out there. Otherwise, these stories wouldn't exist all around the world. But my biggest fear is not being able to catch up with these things before they become extinct, and then they become this thing that exists forever in obscurity, and you never really know the root of where it actually came from.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that we're seeing that with orang pendek. The people that I spoke with, they said like my grandparents used to see them much more often. My parents would occasionally see like a family unit, but my generation, the only ones that we've seen are older ones. Like we've seen lone individuals, and they're all older, which leads you to think that they are dying out. They're seeing the last of them. Which is unfortunate. But I think that there's 17,000 islands in Indonesia, so there's a lot of unexplored places to still get to. But it's always interesting to me when you talk about hairy hominids and these stories to make the distinction between hominid and a primate, because we're really like the legends kind of span this gambit, and we think of them as the same thing, but there really is this huge distinction between a hominid and a primate, and we don't have another living hominid that we've identified where we can really get to the scientific basis of how we're going to make that distinction, because humans are a part of we are primates, right? But we call ourselves hominids. So would we extend the same kind of respect to another hominid species that we saw? Like, what are we basing it on? Is it just on hair? Like if we had if a chimp was born with a mutation where it wasn't as hairy, would we? Yeah. So I always find that aspect of human evolution really fascinating, because we lived in a world where there were, a dozen species of hominids interacting with each other at any given time. And now we don't. Or maybe we do, but we don't commonly accept that we do.
I mean, that could be where a lot of the Sasquatch stuff comes from. I mean, I know a lot of people kind of throw the undiscovered tribe concept, but I mean, that could go into a whole other level that, if there was all these different subcategories of human-like beings, if one kind of stayed amongst itself, of course it would develop amongst itself, kind of like we were talking about with the last one. So, maybe the whole thing of the Sasquatch thing is more of what the natives talk about, that they're us, they're people, they're just a different tribe, a different variation. Because I've heard from a couple different First Nations that they kind of have this distinct set of rules that when people started developing, they started using fire, they started doing all this stuff. This group of Sasquatch decided they didn't want to do that. They wanted to stay everything natural. They didn't want to be part of that. So if you start hearing some of these old native stories, it adds even more of a human component to some of these things. And I'm sure that, you've traveled around the world talking to a bunch of people about this type of stuff. I'm sure that that's probably one of those things that's universal across countries, across continents, is that you start seeing these same things that are reoccurring.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the First Nations groups that I spoke with in Vancouver told me the same thing. That they said, they were like, yeah, you're thinking about Sasquatch all wrong. Like, this is not an animal. This is just a different tribe of people. Like, this is these are humans, just not in the way that they don't look like us, but these are people. And I thought that was a very interesting perspective on this. And when you're talking about orang pendek, I do think that there's likely two different animals that people are talking about, and they're just using this one term. I do think that there's likely a ground-dwelling gibbon that is there, and a primarily ground-dwelling upright walking gibbon, because it would give it an evolutionary advantage. The main predator in the area is a tiger, and tigers are not known to attack humans. The only place where tigers really predate humans with any regularity is in India, and there's a number of different factors for that. But in Indonesia, they tend to leave people alone. And the theory is it's because we look so different than their prey because we're walking upright. So we just don't look like an easy meal. So if a gibbon was to evolve that and to walk upright as well, they would get the same type of protection that we have. And then there's the hominids, where the descriptions of them are very, very clearly hominid, where it's really, just a smaller human-like, likely a descendant of Homo floresiensis. And Mike Morwood, who was the researcher who found Homo floresiensis, I was able to meet with him at one point while I was over there in Java. And he said that he had evidence that Homo floresiensis was around until at least the 1920s. And he said, it's not good enough evidence for me to publish in a scientific paper, but I'm working on it. I'm working on gathering more. And unfortunately, he died less than a year later. And the research is apparently gone. Nobody's been able to find it. I've spoken with, some members of his team, and I've had a production company that I was working with reach out to members of his family, and nobody can find the research that he was talking about. That gave him, at least he believed, that they were there until the 1920s.
I think that was a really interesting point you just brought up, Pat, about how it could be kind of two different creatures or two different things being kind of confabulated into one story, because I think Shayn will attest to this. That's something, just again, in our limited research for the show, that's something we've come across time and time again, how, again, this real world nugget of truth could be combined with this folklore throughout the years to come up with this kind of, again, outlandish story. We've talked about kind of sea monsters and river monsters here recently on the show, and it seems like, especially in those kind of cases, it could be, it was a really big catfish or something like that, but then you get just as many stories where it's, a seasoned riverboat captain or something is like, no, that was no whale or whatever that I've ever seen. So it could be these two things that kind of get combined throughout the years. So I was just wondering, have you come across any kind of sea monsters or anything like that in your research? And if so, what are your opinions and thoughts on those type tales?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've done both Loch Ness and Caddy. Those were two of the expeditions that I've done. And Loch Ness, I'm very sorry to say, I don't believe that there is a large undiscovered creature there. I think that there are some really cool things in the lake, but it's an extremely deep and very, very cold area. But they've recently done eDNA surveys and found, there's a lot of eels, there's a lot of salmon-like fish, but there's really nothing that came back with like unidentified DNA. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there's a lot of, when you read the Loch Ness stories, it's exactly what you're describing.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And we are back to the show. Let's hop right in.
Some of the original sightings of the Loch Ness Monster happened miles away from the loch on land.
Yeah, I was going to say, he came on land more often with the old stories. You never just saw him in the water with the old stories.
Yeah,
well, that's kind of like the salamander theory, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that as well. But I mean, a salamander that big would be a real tough sell.
Yeah, the old stories, they would mention that they'd come up and like eat their sheep and stuff like that and then disappear back into the water. So like, maybe there was something there at one point, but then it kind of turned into this big folklore thing as the years went on. But again, like the characteristics are so different.
Yeah, there's one of the original stories. It's like a deer. Like they're describing a deer very, very clearly, and you're like, I don't understand. How is this the loch? Like this is definitely a deer. This person just had never seen a deer this big. But then there's the idea of a deer swimming, the head sticking out of the water. So I've gone camping extensively up in Maine, and if you're ever out on like a kayak and a moose pops up next to you out of the water, like that's a sea monster. When that moose pops its head up, if it doesn't have antlers, you're like, what the hell is that? This huge 8-foot tall animal that you're in the water. You don't expect to see a moose, but they eat algae. They're really good swimmers. I can see where people have this kind of misidentification, or even a whole bunch of birds in a row kind of moving in the same pattern. So there's a lot of different things that can be misidentified with the Loch Ness Monster. With Caddy, I think that there's some of that. So there's some of these, we found this mysterious blob squatch that washed up, and no one's exactly sure what it is. And like usually it's a basking shark or a sperm whale or something that's decayed in a particular way that makes it look like this. But then I do also think that there are undiscovered creatures in the deep ocean. Even the most conservative marine biologists will say that there are undiscovered creatures left. Darren Naish, I think, famously did a mathematical analysis where he said, I think he came up with 6. I think there's 6 large creatures over 10 feet long left to be discovered or something like that. But I mean, even, like I said, even conservative biologists, and the unique features of Vancouver are that you're in a heavily populated area that reaches deep water really, really quickly. So usually from the shore, you can't see an area that goes down 1,000 feet. But in Vancouver, you can. And the sightings of Caddy correlate to the colder water currents that are coming in. So I do absolutely think there's some kind of large undiscovered creature that normally lives in the deep, but people in Vancouver just happen to get glimpses of it. When it's coming up, it's probably following a prey species on a migratory route. And so I really think there is something behind that. But I tend to go with it's probably some type of squid, more likely. But I don't really have a reason for that other than I really love squids.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of giant squids that are still somewhat recently being discovered. I mean, the whole idea of like the Kraken existed in folklore forever until maybe like the early 2000s when they started discovering these giant squids. And then they realized that they would attack whales. And then they started correlating the fact that from underneath, when there's not a lot of movement going on back in the day, they saw a boat, they assumed it was a whale, so they'd come up and attack it. And that's where all these different Kraken stories come from. But I know that there's even a lot of different species of squids that they theorize and know exist, but they haven't even laid eyes on them yet. Like, what was the what's that really, really weird looking one that has like the really elongated head and has like the big long, like almost like kind of square looking tentacles that come down? And they've only captured
I think it's a long arm.
Yeah,
like a long arm squid.
Yeah, they only caught like one picture of that thing so far, and it was a baby, so they don't even know the full size that these things can even reach anyways. I mean, just simple stuff like that correlating into like the early 2000s. I mean, what else could possibly be down there, especially species that don't have the ability to come up ever? Because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that's so used to existing at such high pressure lower in the water that there's probably some giant stuff that has never even come anywhere near the surface before.
The wildest animals that we will ever find are down at the deep parts of the ocean. I mean, you're talking about the volcanic vents where you've got a tube worm. You might have an 8-foot long tube worm where the base of it exists in an area that's 700 degrees. 700 degrees from and then the top of it, so 8-foot difference, the top of the animal is going to be in like 30 degrees. So the animal, and it can survive. Like, it can survive that temperature variation. Imagine having your feet in 700 degrees and your head just above freezing. It's wild to me. Absolutely wild. Everything that we find in the deep ocean. But yeah, there's a lot of squid species that are yet to be found. Shark species as well. I mean, I think they've only seen the frilled shark. We've only got a couple pieces of footage of it ever. And the megamouth, I want to say like a dozen, less than 20 of them have been found. So yeah, there's sharks and deep sea sharks and squid are the two most likely, in my mind, large animals for us to find.
Well, I'm going to ask this.
I will say that it's a sea serpent and no one else. So that's the bummer.
Well, I'm going to ask this, considering that you're a biologist and you've definitely studied into this type of stuff. Have you done any research into those? A couple of people have discovered them. It's almost like a body of water underneath water, where it's like has a lot more. How does that work? It's a lot more salt to it, so it like exists at a different spot. But even when they try to take the subs into it, they'll like bounce off of it because it's too buoyant, so they can't actually enter these spaces. Like, have you done any research to see if there's good possibility of there maybe being undiscovered species that live in those? And I mean, who knows how far down those things could go? There could be like another second underwater ocean that has an even bigger set of animals, and we'd have no ability to get to them, and they'd have no ability to get through that to us either.
They are really, really interesting areas, and there will be undiscovered creatures there, but they're likely tiny. They're likely very small and, microbes and things in there, because it is such a harsh environment, and it's something where it would be very difficult for cellular life to multicellular life to form under those conditions. Because of the pressure and because of the hypersalinity. But it always reminds me of SpongeBob SquarePants when they like go to the beach under the water, because that's really what it looks like. And if you see some of the footage, there'll be a fish that's like swimming along, and all of a sudden it'll go over one of those lakes, and it's like, I'm dead. And it just dies and sinks down, because even within a few feet of it, the salinity is so high that it just kills anything that tries to get there. So yeah, I think they will find undiscovered species in there, but they are probably microbes and other things, just based on the cellular makeup of multicellular life. But hey, we've been proven wrong. I mean, those hydrothermal vents, there's animals that exist with absolutely no oxygen, or they're chemosynthetic. So they are surviving purely off of like sulfuric acid, basically. Which, I mean, if you can survive in sulfuric acid, then anything's possible.
See, the way I'm seeing it too, I feel like there's got to be some spots where some big pockets of things exist down there, because if we know that there's all these giant squids that exist down there, I'm assuming that there has to be a food chain that goes along with those things. So not only is there probably going to be bigger sharks, but there might even be other stuff that we're not even aware of yet, because I'm assuming that the way the system would work is if this thing's bigger, everything else has to be bigger in comparison. It wouldn't make sense that there would just be one giant monstrous animal and then everything else be microscopic. Otherwise, what would that thing's food source be? Like, there's got to be at least something else that would counteract back and forth with those giant squids. Otherwise, why would they have developed to that size if they didn't have predators that were that size, for example?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. It's called abysmal or benthic gigantism. God, my professor would be so angry at me but it's it is wild when you see that there are a few different evolutionary factors that push for the larger size, not just for prey, not just for predation, but just the environment that's down there. The larger that you are, the more spherical that you are, the more able that you're able to withstand the pressure and to it just makes it easier to survive when you're kind of a bigger size with more of that type of body shape that you typically see in the squids. For the deep sea creatures. And you see that with a lot of different deep sea animals. You see that with Greenland sharks as well. They kind of get this large, elongated body shape. That's the way to survive those pressures. To be that kind of like that's really the evolutionary factor that's pushing them towards that larger size.
We were actually just talking. Oh, I'm sorry, but
no.
I can't believe you brought up the Greenland shark. We were actually just talking about that on probably 3 or 4 episodes back. Shane, if you'd like to elaborate a little bit on our Greenland shark theories.
Oh, yeah, I'll let you lay down the groundwork for it, and then I'll throw in the Greenland shark part, how we started connecting it.
Okay, so we were covering a cryptid sea monster, lake monster called the Altamaha lake monster, native to Georgia. And, we were talking about how this lake system kind of connects to the ocean. And then at that point, all bets are off. It could be anything. And then from just going through the different folklore and the descriptions of the creature, and Shane was Googling while I was going through the notes.
I was looking for a lifespan of like 200 years or so, and how stuff that wouldn't breed very often that might actually come up to certain areas to breed every the sightings were every 100 years or so for that.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, kind of correlating with these cycles of when this thing was kind of reported. There were 80, 100-year gaps between, kind of the big waves of sightings. And it seemed like, the deeper we got into it and the more Shane Googled as we were talking, it was like one thing after the next. He was like, oh my God, here's another connection. So we kind of came out of that episode thinking, okay, either this is a Greenland shark or it truly is just some undiscovered something.
Yeah, some undiscovered shark. But the Greenland shark, I mean, it is one of the strangest animals out there, and nothing about it really seems logical when you first start describing it to people. But yeah, they're incredible.
Yeah, we're reading that they were one of those ones that not a lot of people know much about them, as much research as they've done into them. They don't really know much about their breeding habits. They don't know necessarily, they have the area of where they like to be in, but they're spotted going into even warmer waters during the colder months. So we're even looking into some of these sightings, and we're realizing that they were around January, February, where the water would be a little bit colder. So it makes sense that they would start coming down there. This is what I was talking about, where we end up connecting in a lot of this stuff kind of like you do. We're talking about the Beast of Bladenboro, and we're talking about how this thing used to smash animals' skulls and everything. And then we started connecting in with some other stuff that was happening around that time, and realized that it was a normal thing for people to have pet hyenas. Roosevelt had a pet hyena, and then all of a sudden they passed this law where people couldn't have them, so everybody just pushed them outside before anything else happened with it. So then we started kind of correlating that we think the Beast of Bladenboro was literally just a hyena or a pack of hyenas, because they're known to have that crazy jaw and be able to smash skulls. So just another one that it's if you kind of look at the context around it, it seems like it's I put a lot of stock into it. I think that honestly, the Beast of Bladenboro was probably a hyena, but you have to be able to correlate the two things happening at one time, because if you're just hearing one side or the other side, it doesn't make any sense. But if you hear these stories and then you hear about hyenas getting released in the area at the time, typically not something that'd be in the area, but it makes sense that would be happening at that exact time, that people just kicked out their hyenas that they had as pets.
Absolutely. And that's Charles Fort's like biggest contribution, I think, to the zeitgeist is he just obsessively read newspapers, got newspapers from around the world and got all these stories, and he would like put them into like by date, put them into groups because he wanted to see what was happening everywhere at this one particular time so that he could make those kind of correlations and he could make those associations like that. And that's what he would do. That's how he found a lot of his biggest findings were just from making those kind of correlations and those associations. He was one of the first to really mention like climate change because he found that, that in given years, based on the amount of pollution, there would be this weather event that was happening here. And he was like, maybe we're doing something really bad to the environment. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out there. But he took this huge amount of data and kind of correlated it down to make these associations. And people really weren't doing that at the time. They were looking at everything happening as a very, very localized event, and it's not going to have, repercussions. And he was like, no, we have to look globally. Like everything is a connected system. And just as you're saying, releasing hyenas into the wild is going to cause some really crazy stuff. And people around here have never seen hyenas. So sure, there's going to be some stories that pop up about these giant mutant dogs.
Yeah, that are smashing livestock's head. I mean, where else would that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, and if I remember correctly, in the Beast of Bladenborough story, it was a very short-lived kind of cluster of sightings, which would make even more sense if it was, a handful of these once domesticated quote unquote pets that were released into the wild. And then, whether they got killed off or died of natural causes, then the stories kind of stopped. Sit tight, guys. We got to pay some bills. And now back to the show. But I did want to comment on something else that you said, Pat. We talk about the concept a lot on the show of, for a lot of these type things we talk about, answers are never going to be found. We can't really hope to find concrete answers. But I think as much as we can hope to find these answers, it's in the connections between these different subjects. And, a drum I beat all the time on the show is more than one thing can be true at the same time.
Right.
But anyway, so that kind of just got me thinking about, like you were talking about with Mr. Fort, and kind of drawing these real world connections to these more, paranormal or Fortean type circumstances. So being that you come from a more scientific background, I was just curious here as we are kind of wrapping up and toward the back end of the show, is there any just like outlandish Fortean paranormal story that you kind of unironically believe?
I will say that I love all the stories about aliens. Anything alien related, I want to read more about. I want to learn more about. I want to know more about this. Fort did investigate this and did try to uncover this. But I do find that stuff fascinating. That's a little bit more concrete. I think that my favorite of all of Fort's ideas that I don't believe, but I do love his, sense of drama is the Super Sargasso Sea, where he just thinks that it was the source of, like, the Sargasso Sea is such a weird body of water, right? Like, there's so many different stories about this and different things, and frogfish are so weird. And he threw out that, his concept that this giant Sargasso Sea is where all weirdness comes from. It's where all strange things, where everything else. And then I love the fact that it was years later, decades later after Fort died, that we find that the Sargasso Sea is almost certainly where eels come from.
Which we know nothing about, and they go and breed in the Bermuda Triangle.
But the Sargasso Sea, that is the source of the weirdness. That's the source of the eels. And I was like, he was onto something.
Ahead of his time with his ideas, man. Because, I mean, the eels are one of those weird things that even to this day, as much research as people have done in them, we still don't know anything, again, about the reproductive cycle. All we know is that they go down to the Bermuda Triangle, no matter where they are in the world, they reproduce and they go back. Like, we don't really have much of an explanation.
Freshwater streams, all of a sudden elvers pop up and you've got like, thousands of pounds of glass eels, these little like shiny clear things showing up. I mean, they really, that was one of the reasons that they thought of spontaneous generation, that they thought that there are some animals that just spring out of nothing. So they were like, well, there was nothing here. And now it's like the river is literally full of elvers. So where are these things coming from? And you're like, the Sargasso Sea, actually.
And I mean, since you brought up aliens too, I got to bring this one up because this has been a chain that we've been pulling on for a long time. Just like Mulder says, I want to believe. We definitely believe in extraterrestrials, and we want to believe in them just because the concept's fascinating. And honestly, I put a lot more stock and validity into the fact that we're not the only thing that exists in the universe, considering that the universe is so immensely big. But on the flip side, with a lot of our research, it's actually brought us back to this human connection. And I actually put together at one point this whole episode that was connecting in from, like the Nazi experimentation to when we started pushing into this whole thing with sci-fi, to when MK Ultra started, to when all these experiments and everything started. And we've kind of correlated the fact that we think a good portion of the extraterrestrial phenomenon is actually humans that are using the facade of extraterrestrials to continue on these experiments. And as we've gone down the line with stuff, we've noticed all of these different people talking about seeing mask lines, seeing these different weird things, seeing officers, seeing soldiers and stuff, but they leave that out of the story sometimes. Even Pascagoula. How many times have people talked about Pascagoula? And Orin is probably one of the first people that I've seen that actually throws in the fact that one of the people that experienced it said that the female had a mask line. And that's kind of what started this whole chain of events for us. That it seems like when you going into the thing that you were kind of saying earlier, that more than one thing can be true at a time. I think that there's a huge human aspect to this, but I also think that there's a huge extraterrestrial aspect to this. Mm-hmm. And just like with a lot of this cryptid stuff, there probably is some weird, bizarre things out there that cannot be explained. But on the flip side, there's probably some very easily explainable things, but people just don't want to hear that because it's a lot more fun to live in that world of obscurity than to be like, your Mongolian deathworm is more than likely some type of snake or something, Yeah.
With the aliens, I got to give a speech at NASA, which was amazing. Wow. I was the dumbest person there by a mile, which was awesome. And I got to tell a lot of crazy stories. So the director at the time was this guy, Pete Ward, who was fascinated by the fact that in, modern era, there's still tribes. There's still uncontacted tribes in the world. So they brought me in just to tell some stories about living with different tribes all over the world. So got my wife and I got a full back behind the scenes tour of NASA, got to walk around. We got these cool badges. It was just an amazing day. And then I got to spend half an hour with Pete. So I got to hang out with the director of NASA, and we kind of chatted for a while. And he's like, all right, we got 10 minutes left. Is there anything you want to ask me? Anything at all? And I was like, I couldn't leave here without, he looks at me and goes, aliens? And I was like, yeah, aliens. And he was like, I'm going to tell you something really sad. I was like, all right, I'm ready for it. And he's like, if I had proof of aliens, I would never have to beg for a budget from Congress again. I was like, oh, that is really sad. He's like, I'm not saying they're not out there. I'm not saying there's not anything. And he's like, but if I had indisputable evidence, he's like, I would not have the budget that I've got right now. I was like, all right, fair enough.
Well, I think that's kind of a good point and hits on a lot of things we've talked about in this episode. People want to believe kind of the fun, sexy thing, just really big squid is not as sexy and fun as a Loch Ness monster. Some undiscovered primates not as fun as and sexy as some woo-woo Bigfoot. And like you said, the whole alien thing, it's more fun to think that there's something out there than, a lot of this could just be government experimentation or, something much more mundane than that. So I think that's a really interesting point. And bringing it back around to, something we talked about at the very top of the show, it gets back to the idea of real cryptids versus these more kind of fantastical, outlandish things that get lumped into real cryptids. And I think it kind of does a disservice to the field of cryptozoology for a lot of people. They're, that's just, hokum and all this baloney pie in the sky crap. When there's true cryptids all over the place, and they're just all lumped in together. We need a different word.
Like squonk is like always grouped in with cryptids, and like every bit of research that I've ever done into that, it is simply created to get people to stop destroying the forest in Pennsylvania. That entire book, like the snipe, like that's the even funnier part is snipes come from the same book, and everybody grew up with, oh, you're gonna go out and catch some snipes, you know, go bang the pot, go on a snipe hunt, but everybody knows that's a joke. But then squonk for some people in the cryptid community is still like it's out there, like it's from the same book, man.
We gotta find it.
Like this is clearly folklore. Like,
yeah, agreed.
But man, we'll definitely have to have you come back on again, man, because we haven't even gotten into all of your fascinating stories from traveling, even beyond the cryptid stuff, like you getting to do like the fire or the ant ceremony and all the different other stuff. So we'll have to have you come back on at some point, and we can talk about all of your world travels and get back into cryptids and stuff. All right, guys, this is our last break, so hold on tight.
And now back to the show.
So we're starting to wrap up towards the end, Pat. If anybody wanted to come and find all of the fascinating research you do, possibly pick up a copy of your book, even possibly get a signed copy, where can people find you on the internet, and where can people come and find your research?
Thank you. So I'm at patspain.com and on Instagram and TikTok. So you can find me at any of those. Books are at Amazon, or you can get your local bookstore to order them. I've got 6 books in the series. And then I'll also be speaking at CryptidCon in November in Kentucky. So come on out and check it out. I'll have a table there, and I'll be selling some books and signing things. And if you'd like to sign copies, though, just patspain.com, and I'll be happy to send them to you.
Perfect. Man, I really appreciate you, as usual, making the time to come on, having a conversation with us, and I'm glad that we were able to include Orin with this one, because I knew it was going to be fun having 3 analytical minds all together.
Absolutely. No, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Well, Pat, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to talk with you. I hope maybe you'll grace us again in the future, and I can't wait to hear some more of your stories.
Thank you very much.
All right. If anyone would like to get in touch with us or be a guest on the show, Shane, tell them how they can do that.
First and foremost, you guys can email us at bizarreencounters@outlook.com, or you guys can get a hold of us through social media. Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok are the ones that we're the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of us through the submission form, which is available up at the top of the link tree and goes directly to our email. And the last way you guys can get a hold of us is through the hotline. You guys can call or text that 24/7, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you happen to miss that, all that information is available down in the show description.
And you guys be sure to show some love to our sponsors and friends of the show. We got our buddies Rick and Hans with I Know Squatch for all your squatchy gear needs. We got our buddy Dave, a.k.a. the Snarly Yow, with Snarly Yow Natural Products. And we got our buddy Joe with Cryptozoology for all your wearable
cryptid favorites. I wanted to throw in on that one too.
It can still be Halloween cryptids.
Halloween cryptids. And if anybody is trying to get spooky this spooky season and you guys want to take advantage of our affiliate links, you guys can go scoop yourself some paranormal investigating equipment from Dimension Devices, and you guys can also get yourself some stickers, t-shirts, all that fun stuff from Sticker Mule, and we got some additional discounts and credits available for you guys, and more information on that is available down in the show description. And with that, I have been the one that some refer to as Shane Squatch.
And I have been the big bad boo daddy, Orin Felix.
And guys, I remind you every single show, and especially this spooky season, always, guys, remember to always, always stay bizarre. Bizarre. Bizarre.
Squids is cryptids?